A child stands at a neighbor's door, barefoot, emaciated, covered in rope burns, begging for help. Another scavenges through school trash bins, so hungry he's eating scraps meant for the garbage. 4 sisters decompose upstairs while their mother lives among the bodies. These children became invisible. The systems built to protect them failed, and the women who should have loved them became their worst nightmares. Before we dive in, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? You're about to witness something most people turn away from, but you're here. That matters. Case 1. Daniel Pelker, born July 15, 2007. Coventry, England. Picture this. A 5-year-old boy at Little Heath Primary School, so thin his bones press against his skin. Daniel Pelker didn't play during lunch. He didn't laugh with other kids. He hunted. His small hands rifled through trash bins, searching for scraps, anything edible. Teachers watched him shove food into his mouth so fast he choked. They watched him hoard crackers in his pockets, like a prisoner hoarding contraband. One afternoon, a staff member caught him drinking water from a bathroom sink, desperately gulping it down as if he hadn't had a drink in days. He hadn't. Daniel's mother, Magdalena Wuczak, and her boyfriend, Mariusz Krężołek, had moved from Poland to Coventry in 2005. By 2011, their home had become Daniel's prison. While his siblings ate meals, Daniel was locked away. Cupboards, closets, a bare room with nothing but a soiled mattress on the floor. No blankets, no toys, no comfort. The abuse was methodical, calculated. Wuczak and Krężołek didn't just neglect Daniel, they orchestrated his suffering. They beat him, starved him for days. When he cried from hunger, they laughed. Text messages recovered from Krężołek's phone painted a sickening picture. The couple joked about Daniel's desperation. They mocked his pain. One message read like a hunter bragging about a trapped animal. In July 2011, Daniel showed up at accident and emergency with a broken arm. Bruises covered his small body, dark, purple shadows that screamed abuse. The hospital staff asked questions. Social services opened an inquiry. But when caseworkers arrived at the home, Wuczak refused them entry. She smiled. She made excuses. She played the concerned mother, and they believed her. The case was closed. Back at school, teachers kept reporting. Daniel's English was limited, but his actions spoke louder than words ever could. He scavenged, he begged, he stole food from other children's lunchboxes. Staff members filed referral after referral. Police were notified. Social services received calls. Healthcare providers documented his condition, but no one connected the dots. Daniel remained invisible. At home, the torture escalated. Investigators would later discover that Wuczak and Krężołek had turned starvation into a game. Hidden caches of food sat untouched in the house, food Daniel was forbidden to eat. His room had nothing. No comfort, no warmth. Just a child slowly dying while the people supposed to protect him filed paperwork and moved on to the next case. On March 1, 2012, Daniel suffered a catastrophic blow to his head. The force was brutal, fatal. But Wuczak and Krężołek didn't call for help, not immediately. They waited. For over 30 hours, Daniel lay dying while his mother and her boyfriend went about their day. 30 hours. When emergency services finally arrived, it was too late. Daniel Pelker died weighing 10.4 kilograms. That's 22.9 pounds. For a 4-year-old boy, that weight would be concerning. Daniel was 4 years old, nearly 5. His weight was less than the median for a toddler. Let that sink in. The autopsy revealed bruises and abrasions covering his entire body. Layers upon layers of old and new injuries. His system had shut down from prolonged starvation. The pathologist's report was one of the most disturbing documents the Coventry authorities had ever processed. In March 2013, Magdalena Wuczak and Mariusz Krężołek stood trial for murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Text messages, witness testimony, medical records. The jury convicted them both. Life sentences, minimum 30 years each. Wuczak never made it that long. In July 2015, she died by suicide in prison. Krężołek followed in January 2016, dying of natural causes behind bars. But Daniel's story didn't end with their convictions. The Coventry Safeguarding Children Board launched a serious case review. The findings were damning. Daniel had been failed at every level. Schools reported. Hospitals documented. Social services investigated. Police responded. But the systems didn't talk to each other. No single agency saw the full picture. Daniel became what the review called an invisible child. The report triggered national outrage. Reforms swept through child protection protocols across the UK. Mandatory use of interpreters for non-English speaking families. Strengthened multi-agency communication. Training on disguised compliance. When parents appear cooperative but hide abuse. There was even debate over Daniel's Law, pushing for mandatory reporting with criminal penalties for professionals who failed to act. Daniel Pelker's name became a rallying cry. His face appeared on news broadcasts, in government hearings, in training seminars for social workers. He was no longer invisible, but he was gone, and no reform could bring him back. Case 2. Eunice Spry, Gloucestershire, England, 1980s through 2004. Some monsters wear crosses. Some quote scripture while they destroy lives. Eunice Spry was one of them. For nearly 2 decades, this foster and adoptive mother lorded over 3 children in her home near Cheltenham, England. To the outside world, she was devout, pious, a woman of deep faith who opened her home to children in need. Social workers praised her commitment. Neighbors saw a church-going woman raising kids others had abandoned. Behind closed doors, Eunice Spry was running a house of horrors. It started slowly. Discipline, she called it. Biblical correction. Sparing the rod, she claimed, would spoil the child. But what happened inside that house went far beyond discipline, far beyond correction. In 1994, Spry withdrew all 3 children from school. Homeschooling, she told authorities. She'd teach them herself, reading, writing, scripture. The system nodded and moved on. No one checked. No one followed up. And just like that, 3 children vanished from public view. No teachers to notice bruises. No classmates to hear their cries. No school nurses to ask questions. They were invisible. Inside the home, Spry's discipline became torture. She beat them with sticks, metal bars, anything within reach. The children learned to brace for impact, to bite down on their screams, because crying only made it worse. Then came the invisible chair. Picture this. A child forced into a squatting position against a wall. No actual chair beneath them. Just air. Muscles screaming. Legs shaking. Hold that position for hours. Try to stand, and the beating starts again. Try to sit, and you're punished. So you squat, and you hold, and your body breaks down cell by cell while Eunice Spry watches, Bible in hand, quoting verses about obedience. But she didn't stop there. When the children's skin wasn't bruised enough, Spry grabbed sandpaper, coarse, rough sandpaper. She rubbed it against their skin until it bled. Raw, open wounds that burned with every movement. Infections festered, scars formed. And still, no one outside that house knew. The forced ingestion was perhaps the most disturbing. Spry made these children drink bleach. Straight bleach, the kind that burns your throat, corrodes your esophagus, destroys your insides. Washing up liquid followed. Thick, soapy poison that made them vomit. And when they vomited, she made them eat it. Their own vomit. Animal feces. Whatever degradation she could dream up, she forced down their throats. Starvation was another weapon. Days without food, the children's bodies withered, their stomachs cramped. They begged, and Eunice Spry quoted scripture about fasting and sacrifice. When they weren't being tortured, they were locked away, naked, alone, in cold rooms for days at a time. No blankets, no clothes, just 4 walls, and the sound of their own breathing. And here's where it gets even darker. One of the children was fraudulently kept in a wheelchair for 4 years. 4 years. Not because they couldn't walk, but because Spry wanted disability benefits, money. She collected checks, while a perfectly able child sat confined to a chair, muscles atrophying, life passing by, medical fraud, financial abuse, psychological destruction. All of it hidden behind the mask of religious devotion. December 2004. A teenage survivor finally found the courage to speak. A family friend, someone outside Spry's control, listened, really listened, and believed. Police arrived. Medical examinations followed. What doctors found made seasoned investigators sick. Scars upon scars, old wounds layered over older wounds, evidence of systematic, prolonged torture, tools of abuse throughout the house, improvised restraints, records of cruelty. Eunice Spry's response? Denial, complete, unwavering denial. At her 2007 trial at Bristol Crown Court, Spry invoked scripture. She claimed she was teaching discipline, godly correction. The children were difficult, she said, disobedient. She was simply doing what the Bible commanded. The jury wasn't buying it. 26 counts. Child cruelty, unlawful wounding, actual bodily harm, perverting the course of justice. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom 26 times. Sentencing, 14 years. On appeal, reduced to 12. 12 years for nearly 2 decades of torture. Eunice Spry served just over 7 years. In June 2014, she was released on license, walking free while her victims carried scars, physical and psychological, that would never fade. But the survivors didn't stay silent. Christopher Spry, one of the children who endured Eunice's torture, wrote a memoir, Child C. In it, he detailed every horrific moment. The invisible chair, the sandpaper, the forced ingestion, the wheelchair imprisonment. His words gave voice to the voiceless. His courage inspired investigations into how homeschooling exemptions and deference to good character can conceal monstrous abuse. Media investigations followed. Documentaries, news specials, public awareness grew. The case became a textbook example of how isolation, especially under the guise of religious homeschooling, creates perfect conditions for abuse. Reforms were debated. Stricter oversight of homeschooling families, mandatory check-ins for withdrawn children, background checks for foster and adoptive parents with teeth, not just paperwork. But for 3 children who spent their childhoods in that Gloucestershire house, reforms came too late. Eunice Spry hid behind a Bible while she destroyed lives. She weaponized faith, twisted scripture into justification for sadism. And for nearly 20 years, no one stopped her. Case 3. Jeremiah Valencia, Nambe, New Mexico, USA, 2017. Before we go further, what's the weather like where you are right now? Sunny? Raining? Cold? While you're sitting there, safe and comfortable, think about this. There are children right now who don't have that comfort. If these stories matter to you, if you believe these names deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button. You watching, you listening. It keeps their stories alive. It forces the world to pay attention. Now, let's talk about Jeremiah, 13 years old, last enrolled at Nambe Falls Elementary in early 2016. And then, nothing. No follow-up calls, no truancy officers knocking on doors, no mandated reports filed. The system that was supposed to track him, protect him, simply let him disappear. In rural New Mexico, it's easy to vanish. Miles between homes, dirt roads that go on forever, neighbors far enough away that screams don't carry. Jeremiah's home sat in that kind of isolation, the kind where no one sees, no one hears, and no one came looking. Inside that house, Jeremiah's mother, Tracy Pena, and her boyfriend, Thomas Ferguson, turned his life into a nightmare. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't punishment. This was systematic, calculated torture designed to break a child's body and spirit. Ferguson's adult son, Jordan Nunez, didn't just watch. He joined in. 3 adults, 1 child. Jeremiah was confined in a steel dog kennel. Not a room, not a closet. A cage meant for animals. Cramped, cold, metal bars pressing into his skin. Imagine curling into a ball night after night, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt, knowing that when morning comes, it only gets worse. They didn't stop at confinement. Shock collars, the kind used to train dogs, strapped around Jeremiah's body, a button pressed, and electricity surged through him. Pain that makes every muscle seize, pain that leaves you gasping. They did this for fun, for control, to watch him suffer. Brass knuckles came next, metal wrapped around fists, turning every punch into maximum damage. Jeremiah's body became a canvas of bruises, purple, black, yellow, old injuries healing under new ones. A map of agony written on a 13-year-old's skin. Then the hammer. Not a single strike, not an accident, deliberate blows, over and over, bones breaking, tissue rupturing. A child's screams echoing off walls in a house too far from anyone who would care. Starvation was another tool in their arsenal. Jeremiah's body withered, his cheeks hollowed, his ribs showed. While Pena, Ferguson, and Nunez ate, Jeremiah starved. They humiliated him, degraded him, treated him like he wasn't human. And when Jeremiah finally stopped breathing, when the torture finally killed him, they didn't call for help. They grabbed shovels, a rural road outside Nambe, dirt and scrub brush. They dug a shallow grave and dumped Jeremiah's body like trash, covered him with loose soil, drove away, went on with their lives as if a child hadn't just been murdered. But graves don't stay hidden forever. January 2018. Tracy Pena, sitting in jail on unrelated charges, confessed to an inmate. Maybe guilt crept in. Maybe she needed to unburden herself. Whatever the reason, she talked. And that inmate talked to authorities. Police descended on that rural area. Shovels, cadaver dogs, crime scene tape stretched across dirt roads. And there, in that shallow grave, they found Jeremiah Valencia. What remained of him told the story of his final months. Forensic examiners documented the injuries, the broken bones, the evidence of prolonged abuse. The medical examiner's report became a chronicle of torture. Thomas Ferguson never faced trial. Sitting in jail, awaiting justice, he died by suicide. An escape Jeremiah never got. Jordan Nunez pleaded guilty to child abuse, resulting in death and evidence tampering. 21 years. He'll walk free someday. Jeremiah never will. Tracy Pena pleaded guilty to child abuse, resulting in death, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. 12 years. 9 suspended. She served 3 years. 3 years for torturing her son to death. 3 years. The district attorney stood before cameras and said what everyone was thinking. This was a systemic failure. Jeremiah's school absence lasted over a year. Over a year, and no one followed up. No truancy officer knocked on the door. No social worker made a visit. No CYFD, Children, Youth, and Families Department intervention happened. They relied on parental claims. Oh, we're re-enrolling him. He's being homeschooled. Everything's fine. And the system said, okay, and walked away. Rural isolation becomes a weapon when oversight disappears. When a child can miss a full year of school and no one cares enough to check, the system isn't just failing, it's complicit. After Jeremiah's death, New Mexico reviewed its chronic truancy protocols. Policies changed on paper, promises were made. But across rural America, children are still disappearing from school rolls without follow-up, still vanishing into homes where isolation enables horror. Jeremiah Valencia was 13 years old when he died. He should be 21 now, an adult, living his life. Instead, he's a name in a case file, a cautionary tale. A child the system forgot. Dog kennels, shock collars, hammers, a shallow grave. That was Jeremiah's childhood. And 3 adults made it happen while the system looked the other way. Case 4, Scotty McMillan, West Calne Township, Pennsylvania, USA. November 2014. 3 years old. That's how old Scotty was when he died. 3 years old, and his life ended over toast. Toast. Think about that. Think about the last time you made toast. Butter melting, that warm smell, a simple breakfast. For Scotty McMillan, Toast became the trigger for 3 days of deliberate, calculated torture that would end his life. November 2014. A crowded trailer in West Cowan Township, Pennsylvania. Inside, Scotty's mother, Gillian Tate, her boyfriend, Gary Fellenbaum's estranged wife, Amber, 2 infants, and Scotty, a toddler trying to navigate a home filled with adults who should have protected him. Scotty did something. Maybe he refused the toast. Maybe he threw it. Maybe he said no. The details of that initial defiance are small, almost insignificant. What matters is what came next. What came next was 3 days of hell. Gary Fellenbaum decided Scotty needed to be taught a lesson. Gillian Tate agreed. And Amber, she stood by and watched. 3 adults, 1 3-year-old boy. They hung him upside down. Imagine that. Your entire world flipped. Blood rushing to your head. Disoriented, terrified. Scotty dangled there, helpless, while they decided what to do next. Whipping came first. Not with a belt. Not with a hand. They made a homemade lash, something designed to maximize pain. Each strike tore into Scotty's skin. Welts rose. Skin broke open. He screamed. They didn't stop. Then the curtain rod. Metal. Heavy. They swung it like a bat, against Scotty's back, his legs, his arms, anywhere they could reach. Bones bruised, maybe fractured. Pain radiating through a tiny body that didn't understand why this was happening. An aluminum strip followed, thin, sharp-edged, more precise than the curtain rod. More cuts, more blood. Scotty's body became a patchwork of injuries, each one layered on top of the last. And then, the frying pan. Cast iron, most likely. Heavy enough to do serious damage. They beat a 3-year-old child with a frying pan. His head, his torso. Blows that would knock an adult unconscious. Scotty was a toddler. 3 days. 72 hours of torture. And during those 3 days, Gillian Tate and Gary Fellenbaum took a break. They left Scotty, unresponsive, broken, barely breathing, alone in that trailer. Where did they go? To buy a car. They went car shopping, picked out a vehicle, negotiated the price, signed paperwork, drove it off the lot. Then they stopped for pizza, sat in a restaurant, ate, laughed, talked about their new car, went back to the trailer, and had sex. All while Scotty lay dying in the next room. When they finally noticed he'd stopped breathing, they called 911. Emergency responders arrived. Paramedics rushed Scotty to the ER, and what the medical staff saw that day haunted them. Nurses wept, openly wept. Hardened ER doctors who'd seen gunshot wounds, car accidents, every kind of trauma. They stood in that room and cried. One nurse later testified that in 20 years of emergency medicine, she'd never seen injuries that severe on a child. Scotty's entire body was destroyed. Every inch carried evidence of torture. Bruises in different stages of healing, proof this wasn't the first time. Fresh wounds overlapping old scars. Internal injuries. Broken bones. Bleeding. Swelling. He never had a chance. Scotty McMillan was pronounced dead, 3 years old, killed over toast. The investigation moved fast. Police interviewed Tate and Fellenbaum separately. Their stories didn't match. Contradictions piled up. Forensic evidence painted a clear picture. 3 days of systematic abuse, multiple weapons, multiple adults participating or enabling. Amber Fellenbaum was charged with child endangerment. She didn't actively torture Scotty, but she was there. She saw it happening. She did nothing. Amber pleaded guilty, received a shorter sentence. She'll get out someday. Gillian Tate, Scotty's mother, pleaded guilty to 3rd-degree murder, conspiracy, and child endangerment. The court sentenced her to 42 to 94 years. She'll die in prison. Gary Fellenbaum pleaded guilty to 1st-degree murder. The judge's words during sentencing were scathing. Life without parole, plus additional decades stacked on top for the other charges. Fellenbaum will never walk free, never breathe air outside prison walls, never see another sunrise beyond razor wire. But here's something that matters. Scotty had a 6-year-old brother. That little boy survived. He witnessed horrors no child should see, heard his brother's screams, knew what was happening in that trailer. After Scotty's death, that 6-year-old was removed from the home, placed in care, and eventually adopted. A family took him in, gave him safety, love, a chance at a real childhood. He's healing, or trying to. The scars don't go away, but he's alive. He survived. The Scotty McMillan case became a catalyst for change in Pennsylvania. Child welfare agencies reviewed protocols. Police departments received additional training. The focus shifted to multi-adult households, places where responsibility diffuses because everyone assumes someone else will intervene. That's what happened in that Westtown Township trailer. 3 adults. Not one of them stopped it. Jillian participated. Gary orchestrated. Amber watched. Collective abdication. Everyone assumes someone else will be the adult in the room. Everyone assumes someone else will protect the child. And in that assumption, in that diffusion of responsibility, children die. Scotty McMillan should be 13 years old right now. He should be in middle school, playing sports, making friends, living. Instead, his life ended at 3. 3 days of torture. 3 adults who failed him. 3 years old. Over toast. Case 5. Bonita Jacks, Washington, D.C., USA, 2008. Quick question. What time is it where you're at? Morning? Middle of the night? Afternoon break? Whatever time it is, you've made it this far. You're still here, listening to stories most people can't stomach. That says something about you. If you haven't already, hit that like button. Share this video. These cases need to be seen. These children's names need to be remembered. Don't just watch, engage, make their stories count. Now, let's talk about what U.S. Marshals found on January 9, 2008. Southeast Washington, D.C. A routine eviction. Landlords hadn't received rent in months. Legal notices went unanswered. So the marshals showed up with paperwork, ready to clear the property. Standard procedure. They'd done it 1,000 times before. Nothing about this was standard. They knocked. Bonita Jacks answered the door, calm, collected. She didn't resist, didn't argue, just stepped aside and let them in. The smell hit them first. Anyone who's worked in law enforcement, emergency services, or crime scene investigation knows that smell. It's unmistakable. Heavy. Thick. The kind that coats your throat and stays in your nostrils for days. Death has a smell, and it was everywhere in that house. The marshals climbed the stairs. Upstairs, they found 4 girls. 4 sisters. Brittany Jacks, 16 years old. Tatiana Jacks, 11. Nikia Fogel, 6. Arja Fogel, 5. All dead. All decomposed. Decomposition so advanced that forensic pathologists struggled to determine exact causes of death. Bodies breaking down. Flesh deteriorating. The heat of a D.C. summer and the cold of winter accelerating the decay. These girls had been dead for months. Experts estimated they'd likely died sometime in mid-2007. Mid-2007. That means Bonita Jacks lived in that house. Ate, slept, went about her daily life, with her 4 dead daughters decomposing upstairs. 6 months. Maybe longer. Just her and 4 bodies. Let that sink in. Forensic examiners worked with what remained. Brittany, the oldest, showed evidence of stab wounds. Multiple. Defensive wounds suggested she fought back, tried to survive. Tatiana, Nikia, and Arja likely died from strangulation or blunt force trauma. Likely because decomposition had erased too much physical evidence for certainty. What was certain? Bonita Jacks killed them. Investigators interviewed her. Over and over. Her story changed every time. First, she claimed they died of natural causes. 4 children, 16, 11, 6, and 5, all died naturally around the same time. No one bought it. Then came the demonic possession narrative. Bonita Jacks looked investigators in the eye and said her daughters were possessed by demons. Evil spirits inhabited their bodies. She had to stop the demons. She was protecting the world, doing God's work. The girls weren't really her daughters anymore. They were vessels for darkness, delusion, psychosis, or a calculated excuse. Psychiatrists evaluated her. Was she competent to stand trial? The courts said yes. She understood right from wrong, understood the charges, understood the consequences. Her defense attorneys waived a jury trial. Instead, Bonita Jacks stood before Judge Frederick Weisberg in a bench trial. Just her lawyers, the prosecution, and a judge who would decide her fate. The evidence was overwhelming. 4 dead children, a mother who lived among their bodies. Shifting explanations. No credible alternative theory. Judge Weisberg delivered the verdicts. 4 counts of felony murder. 3 counts of first-degree murder. Guilty, guilty, guilty. All 7 counts. Sentencing. 120 years. 4 consecutive 30-year terms. No possibility of parole. Bonita Jacks will die in prison. There is no scenario where she walks free. But here's what makes this case even more enraging. The system knew something was wrong. April 2007. Social worker Kathleen Lopes made a home visit. Standard welfare check. She knocked on the door. Bonita Jacks answered, smiled, and refused entry. Said everything was fine. The girls were fine, just busy. Lopes couldn't force her way in without a warrant. She filed a report and moved on. Police conducted welfare checks. Knocked, got the same response. Everything's fine. No warrant, no entry. They left. Housing inspectors were supposed to make mandatory monthly visits to the property. They didn't. Paperwork got filed claiming inspections happened. They didn't. Schools stopped seeing the girls. Attendance dropped to 0. Truancy wasn't escalated. No follow-up. No investigation. 4 girls disappeared from public view, and every system designed to protect them failed. Lopes tried. She filed the right paperwork, but the infrastructure didn't support follow-through. Cases fell through cracks. Bureaucracy moved slowly. And children died. After the bodies were discovered, Washington, D.C., exploded with outrage. The mayor dismissed 6 CFSA, Child and Family Services Agency, employees. Reviews were launched, reports written, reforms promised. New protocols demanded better information sharing among schools, police, and child welfare agencies. Caseworkers received training on forced entry procedures when child safety was at risk. Truancy escalation timelines were tightened. On paper, it looked good, but 4 sisters were already dead. Brittany, who should be 32 now. Tatiana, who'd be 27. Nikaya, 22. Aja, 21. Instead, they decomposed in an upstairs room while their mother lived below, claiming demons made her do it. Bonita Jacks sits in prison. 120 years. No parole. She'll never leave. Never feel sunlight without bars casting shadows. Never know freedom again. But her daughters never got to know adulthood. Never got to graduate. Fall in love. Have families. Live. 4 girls. 1 house. 6 months of decay. And a system that knocked on the door but never broke it down. Case 6. Jeanette Maples. Eugene, Oregon, USA. 2009. 15 years old. That's how old Jeanette Maples was when she died. At 15, most teenagers are worried about homework, friends, what to wear to school. Jeanette was worried about finding water, any water, because her mother and stepfather wouldn't give her any. She drank from the dog bowl. On her hands and knees, face pressed to a metal dish on the kitchen floor, lapping up water meant for the family pet. When that was empty or inaccessible, she drank from the toilet, kneeling before a porcelain bowl, scooping handfuls of water into her mouth just to survive another day. This was Jeanette's life inside her mother's home in Eugene, Oregon. Angela McAnulty and her husband, Richard McAnulty, didn't just neglect Jeanette, they orchestrated her destruction. Systematically, methodically, over years. Starvation was the foundation of Jeanette's suffering. While the rest of the family ate meals, Jeanette received scraps, sometimes nothing at all. Her body withered. Bones protruded through skin. her face hollowed out, muscles atrophied from malnutrition. Angela installed locks on the pantry doors, not to keep strangers out, to keep Jeanette away from food. Padlocks, deadbolts, physical barriers between a starving child and sustenance. Jeanette could smell dinner cooking, hear her siblings eating, but she couldn't join them. Forced postures became another weapon. Stand in the corner, for hours. Don't move, don't sit, don't lean. Just stand until your legs give out. When they did, the beatings started. Stand again. Hold that position. Your muscles screaming, your body shaking. No rest, no mercy. The injuries accumulated. Over 200 documented injuries covered Jeanette's body when she died. 200. Bruises in every stage of healing. Fresh purple marks overlapping yellow-green older ones. Cuts, abrasions, burns, broken skin, infected wounds. Each injury told a story of abuse. Each scar mapped a moment of pain. 200 moments. 200 times someone hurt this girl, and no one stopped it. December 9th, 2009. Emergency responders received a call from the McConnelty home. A teenage girl wasn't breathing. They arrived expecting maybe an accident, an overdose, something explainable. What they found defied explanation. Jeanette Maples lay dead, her body so emaciated that paramedics compared her appearance to Holocaust survivors. That's the language used in official reports. Holocaust survivors. Concentration camp victims. That's what years of starvation had done to her. First responders stood in that house and wept. Detectives arrived and struggled to process what they were seeing. Medical examiners documented injury after injury, page after page of forensic evidence showing prolonged, systematic torture. This wasn't a sudden tragedy. This was a slow murder. Angela McConnelty and Richard McConnelty were arrested. The investigation revealed years of abuse hidden behind closed doors. Jeanette had been withdrawn from public school, homeschooled, Angela claimed. No teachers to notice her deteriorating condition. No school nurses to ask questions. No classmates to report bruises. Isolation enabled the abuse. Homeschooling became a shield. And Jeanette became invisible. The trials came. Richard McConnelty faced charges first. The evidence was crushing. Photos of Jeanette's injuries. Medical testimony detailing starvation. Witness accounts of the conditions in that home. Richard pleaded guilty to murder by abuse. Sentencing. Life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. 25 years minimum before he could even be considered for release. Angela McConnelty's trial was different. Prosecutors pursued the death penalty. The abuse was her design, they argued. She was the architect of Jeanette's suffering. Richard enabled, but Angela orchestrated. In 2011, Angela McConnelty pleaded guilty to aggravated murder. The judge sentenced her to death row. She became the first woman sentenced to death in Oregon since 1984. 27 years, no woman had been sent to Oregon's death row in nearly 3 decades. But Oregon's death penalty has always been complicated. Executions rarely happen. Legal challenges pile up. Governors issue moratoriums. In 2020, the Oregon Supreme Court issued a ruling that narrowed the legal definition of aggravated murder. Angela's conviction fell into a gray area. Appeals were filed. Legal arguments dragged on. Then Governor Kate Brown stepped in. She commuted Angela McConnelty's sentence from death to life without the possibility of parole. No execution, but no freedom either. Angela will die in prison, just not by the state's hand. Jeanette's death sparked outrage across Oregon. How does a 15-year-old girl starve to death in her own home without anyone noticing? How does homeschooling become a curtain that hides torture? Oregon's Department of Human Services launched a comprehensive review. The findings were damning. Homeschooling families had virtually no oversight. Once a child was withdrawn from public school, they disappeared from the system. No mandatory check-ins, no welfare visits, no medical examinations required. Reforms followed. New protocols demanded increased oversight of homeschooling cases. especially when children were withdrawn suddenly or without clear educational plans. Mandatory medical checks for isolated older children, kids who weren't attending school, weren't seeing doctors, weren't visible to any outside authority. Strengthened protocols for cross-agency alerts meant that when red flags appeared in one system, other agencies would be notified. Schools, DHS, healthcare providers, everyone needed to talk to each other. On paper, these reforms looked strong. In practice, enforcement remains inconsistent. Homeschooling laws vary wildly by state. Some require regular testing and evaluation. Others require almost nothing. Jeanette Maples would be 30 years old now. She'd be living her own life, making her own choices. Free. Instead, she died at 15, starved, beaten, 200 injuries marking her body like a roadmap of suffering. She drank from dog bowls and toilets because her mother wouldn't give her water, and the system didn't know she existed until she was already gone. Case 7. Victoria Martins, Albuquerque, New Mexico, USA. August 23, 2016. August 23rd. Victoria's 10th birthday. 10 years old. Double digits. A milestone. Most kids that age are blowing out candles, opening presents, surrounded by family and friends, singing happy birthday. Victoria Martins spent her 10th birthday being murdered. Her body was found in the bathtub of her Albuquerque apartment, dismembered, partially burned. A child's remains treated like garbage, disposed of in the place where she used to take baths. When Albuquerque police first arrived at the scene, the narrative seemed clear. Michelle Martins, Victoria's mother, and her boyfriend, Fabian Gonzalez, were in the apartment. Methamphetamine was involved. The initial reports painted a picture of drug-fueled parental violence. Media ran with it. Headlines screamed about a mother who killed her daughter on her birthday. But the narrative was wrong. As forensic investigators dug deeper, evidence started contradicting the initial police story. Cell phone tower logs placed Michelle Martins and Fabian Gonzalez away from the apartment during the time of Victoria's murder. They weren't there when she died. DNA evidence recovered from the scene identified an unknown male assailant, someone who has never been identified. An unknown male murdered Victoria Martins, cut her body apart, burned her remains. And to this day, he has never been caught. But here's the thing. Michelle Martins and Fabian Gonzalez weren't innocent, not even close. They didn't kill Victoria directly, but they created the conditions that led to her death. They allowed people into that apartment. They exposed Victoria to dangerous individuals. They failed to protect her in every possible way. Michelle pleaded no contest to child abuse resulting in death, not murder. Child abuse resulting in death. The prosecution couldn't prove she wielded the weapon, but they proved she failed as a mother in every conceivable way. Her sentence? 12 years. She was released in 2025. Victoria has been dead for 9 years. Michelle Martins is free. Fabian Gonzalez faced more charges: reckless child abuse, evidence tampering, conspiracy. The court held him more accountable for the circumstances surrounding Victoria's death. Sentencing: 37.5 years. He won't see freedom until he's an old man. Jessica Kelly, Fabian's cousin, was also involved. She pleaded guilty to reckless child abuse. Her testimony helped piece together what happened in that apartment. She received a lengthy sentence in exchange for cooperation. But the unidentified male, still out there. The homicide investigation remains technically open, but it's been nearly a decade. Leads go cold, memories fade, evidence degrades. Victoria's killer walks free while her mother just got out of prison. Let that sink in. Now, here's where the systemic failures come in, because they always do. New Mexico's Children, Youth and Families Department, CYFD, had 5 referrals about Victoria before her death. 5 separate calls raising concerns about her welfare. 5 opportunities to intervene. None were investigated. Not one. Files were opened and closed without a single home visit, without a caseworker laying eyes on Victoria. without anyone checking if a little girl was safe. 5 referrals, 5 missed chances. And on her 10th birthday, Victoria was murdered. After her death, CYFD faced intense scrutiny. How does a child with 5 referrals end up dead? How do warning signs get ignored over and over until it's too late? The excuses were familiar. Understaffing, overwhelming caseloads, inadequate training, budget constraints. The same explanations that follow every dead child whose case fell through bureaucratic cracks. New Mexico promised reforms, improved interagency data sharing so police, schools, and child welfare could communicate effectively. Stricter background checks for caregivers and anyone living in a home with children. Enhanced forensic protocols to prevent early narrative mistakes like the ones that initially blamed Michelle and Fabian for the actual murder. But reforms don't bring Victoria back. This case also exposed a critical problem in how law enforcement handles complex crime scenes. The initial rush to assign blame, the immediate assumption that the parents present must be the killers, potentially compromised the investigation into the unknown male. Early police statements shaped public perception. Media coverage amplified those statements. By the time forensic evidence corrected the narrative, the damage was done, and crucial time had been lost in identifying the real killer. Victoria's case became a textbook example of why investigators need to let evidence lead, not assumptions. Why forensic analysis must be thorough before public statements are made. Why obvious answers aren't always correct. But those lessons came too late for Victoria. She never made it to 11. Never started middle school. Never had a first crush. Never went to prom. Never graduated. Never lived. Her 10th birthday, a day that should have been filled with cake and laughter and joy, became the day her life ended in the most brutal way imaginable. And somewhere out there, the man who killed her is still free. Maybe he's lived a normal life these past 9 years. Maybe he has a family, a job, friends who have no idea what he did on August 23, 2016. Michelle Martins is out of prison now, walking around, breathing free air. She didn't kill Victoria, but she failed her, put her in harm's way, allowed danger into their home, and 12 years was the price. 12 years for a mother who lost her daughter on her birthday. 12 years while Victoria's killer remains unidentified. 5 CYFD referrals that went nowhere. 1 little girl who deserved so much better. Victoria Martins should be 19 years old right now, thinking about college, or a career, or travel, living her life. Instead, her remains were found in a bathtub on her 10th birthday. And justice, real justice, never came. Case 8. Arabella McCormack, Spring Valley, San Diego County, USA, 2022. Some monsters wear badges. Some volunteer to counsel police officers. Some stand in churches and offer prayers for protection and guidance. Letitia McCormack did all of that. She was a police chaplain, a volunteer position that put her alongside law enforcement, offering spiritual support to officers dealing with trauma, loss, and the darkest parts of human nature. The uniform, the credentials, the respectability, all of it, a perfect disguise. Because behind closed doors, Letitia McCormack was torturing children. August 30th, 2022. Deputies arrived at the McCormack home in Spring Valley, a community in San Diego County. They were responding to concerns about the children living there. Routine welfare check. Standard procedure. Brian McCormack, Arabella's adoptive father, a border patrol agent, saw the deputies pull up. He knew what they'd find inside. He knew the horrors hidden in that house. And he made a choice. Brian McCormack took his own life. Right there, as deputies approached. One moment, he was alive. The next, gone. A final escape from accountability. The deputies entered the home. What they found inside made seasoned law enforcement officers physically ill. Arabella McCormack, 11 years old, 48 pounds. 48 pounds. An 11-year-old girl should weigh somewhere between 70 and 120 pounds, depending on height and build. Arabella weighed 48. Her bones pressed against paper-thin skin. Her face was gaunt, hollowed out from starvation. Her body showed signs of extreme malnutrition, the kind you see in famine zones, in refugee camps, in documentaries about starvation, not in an American home in San Diego County. But Arabella wasn't alone. 2 younger adopted sisters, 6 and 7 years old, were found in similar condition, severely malnourished, terrified, bearing marks of prolonged abuse. 3 girls, 3 adoptions, 3 lives destroyed. The investigation uncovered a timeline of systematic torture spanning 3 years. The indictment against Letitia McCormack and her maternal grandparents, Stanley Tom and Adela Tom, listed over 700 acts of abuse. 700. That's not a handful of bad days. That's not losing your temper. That's deliberate, calculated, relentless torture carried out day after day after day for 3 years. Starvation was the foundation. Food was withheld for days at a time. When the girls were fed, it was meager, barely enough to keep them alive. Locks on cabinets and refrigerators prevented them from accessing food. They watched others eat while their stomachs cramped with hunger. Beatings were constant. Fists, belts, objects. Whatever was within reach became a weapon. The girls' bodies became maps of abuse, bruises layered on bruises, old wounds healing beneath fresh ones. Forced exertion pushed their malnourished bodies beyond limits. Exercise until you collapse. Stand until your legs give out. Physical punishment designed to break them down when they were already starving. Isolation kept them invisible. The girls were adopted in 2019, and shortly after, they disappeared from public view. Homeschooling, Letitia claimed. Charter school arrangements that required minimal oversight. No teachers to notice weight loss. No school nurses to document injuries. No classmates to ask questions. And here's the most infuriating part. Letitia McCormack was a police chaplain. She volunteered alongside law enforcement. She counseled officers. She represented moral authority and community trust. Who questions a police chaplain? Who suspects that the woman offering prayers for crime victims is torturing children at home? Her community standing became a shield. Her religious involvement provided cover. Her connection to law enforcement gave her credibility that prevented scrutiny. Civil lawsuits filed after Arabella's death alleged that authorities were misled by Letitia's reputation. That her volunteer work created an assumption of trustworthiness. That red flags were dismissed because someone like her couldn't possibly be an abuser. But she was. Letitia McCormack, Stanley Tom, and Adela Tom faced charges of murder, torture, child abuse, and conspiracy. Murder, because Arabella died. Torture, because the abuse was systematic and prolonged. Child abuse, for the 2 surviving sisters. Conspiracy, because all 3 adults participated in or enabled the abuse. The criminal trial has been delayed multiple times, originally scheduled for 2023, then pushed to 2024, now projected for 2026. Legal motions, evidence disputes, pandemic delays, the slow grind of the justice system, while 2 surviving girls try to heal. Prosecutors are pursuing the death penalty under California's torture murder statutes. If convicted, Letitia could join California's death row, though the state has a moratorium on executions. She'd likely spend the rest of her life in prison either way, but the death penalty designation carries symbolic weight. It says, "What you did was so heinous, so beyond the pale, that the ultimate punishment is warranted." Parallel civil lawsuits target child welfare services for negligence in post-adoption monitoring. The girls were adopted through the system in 2019. What oversight happened after that? Who checked on their welfare? Who ensured the adoption was safe? Apparently, no one. Once the adoption was finalized, the girls vanished into a homeschooling arrangement with minimal accountability. The system that placed them in that home didn't follow up to ensure they were thriving, or even surviving. Arabella's death exposes a critical gap in child welfare, post-adoption monitoring. Agencies focus enormous energy on pre-adoption screening, background checks, home studies, interviews. But after finalization, oversight drops dramatically, especially when homeschooling or charter school arrangements eliminate daily contact with mandatory reporters like teachers and counselors. Letitia McCormack knew how to exploit those gaps. Use religious veneer, community standing, homeschooling exemptions, isolation, and 3 girls disappeared into a house of horrors while the community saw a devoted mother and police chaplain. Arabella McCormack died at 11 years old, weighing 48 pounds, after enduring 3 years of starvation, beatings, and torture. Her adoptive father killed himself rather than face accountability. Her adoptive mother awaits trial, possibly facing death penalty. Her grandparents face the same charges, and 2 surviving sisters carry scars, physical and psychological, that will never fully heal. 700 acts of torture, 3 years, 3 little girls, and a police chaplain who fooled everyone. Case 9. Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt, Evans, Utah, USA, 2023 through 2024. Millions of subscribers, millions of views. A picture-perfect family sharing their lives on YouTube. Ruby Franke built an empire on parenting advice through her channel. 8 passengers, 6 children, a devoted mother, homeschooling, discipline, traditional values. Viewers tuned in daily to watch the Franke family navigate life, relationships, and child rearing. It was all a lie. Behind the camera, behind the smiles and carefully curated content, Ruby Franke was torturing her children. August 30th, 2023. Evans, Utah. A quiet neighborhood where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. A 12-year-old boy appeared at a neighbor's door, barefoot, emaciated, his wrists and ankles covered in open wounds, rope burns, so severe the flesh was raw and infected. He'd escaped, climbed out of a window, ran barefoot down the street, knocked on the first door he found, and when that neighbor opened it, the boy said the words that would unravel everything. "I need help." The neighbor called 911 immediately. Police arrived. Paramedics examined the boy. What they saw was horrific. He wasn't just thin, he was skeletal, malnourished to the point of starvation. The rope burns weren't accidental. They were restraint injuries, deep lacerations where bindings had cut into skin over days, maybe weeks, and the wounds had been treated with cayenne pepper paste. Cayenne pepper on open wounds, the burning, the agony. Imagine rope slicing into your wrists until you bleed, and then someone rubbing hot pepper paste into the cuts. That pain doesn't fade. It intensifies. Every nerve ending screaming. That was deliberate. That was torture, disguised as treatment. Officers went to the house where the boy had escaped, Jody Hildebrandt's residence. Jody was a life coach who'd partnered with Ruby Franke in 2022. Together, they ran a program called Connexions, offering parenting and life coaching advice. Jody presented herself as an expert in emotional and behavioral wellness. Ruby trusted her, followed her guidance, and together, they created a prison. Inside Jody's home, police found Ruby's 10-year-old daughter, hiding in a closet, naked, malnourished, terrified. 2 children, both showing signs of prolonged abuse, both belonging to a YouTube family that preached proper parenting to millions. Search warrants were executed. What investigators found painted a chilling picture. Handcuffs, ropes, restraints, journals detailing repentance punishments. Ruby and Jody had documented everything. Pages and pages describing how they disciplined the children, framing torture as religious purification. Repentance work, they called it. Cleansing the children of darkness, purifying their souls through suffering, pain as a pathway to holiness. It was abuse wrapped in scripture. The children were forced into physical labor while starved, made to stand in the sun for hours, bound with ropes and left in painful positions, denied food and water as consequences for perceived disobedience, isolated from the outside world, no school, no friends, no contact with anyone who might ask questions. Ruby Franke's online persona showed a firm but loving mother. In reality, She'd handed her eldest children over to Jody Hildebrandt for imprisonment and torture. And she participated. Actively. Willingly. Both women were arrested. 6 counts of aggravated child abuse each. The charges were specific. Each count represented a separate instance of abuse so severe it met Utah's legal threshold for aggravated charges. In December 2023, both Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt pleaded guilty, not to all 6 counts. Prosecutors allowed them to plead to 4 counts each in exchange for cooperation and avoiding trial. 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. For each woman, sentencing came on February 20th, 2024. Judge John Walton delivered the terms, 4 consecutive sentences of 1 to 15 years each. Under Utah law, consecutive sentences for this type of crime cap at 30 years maximum. So effectively, both women face up to 30 years in prison. But here's the catch. It's an indeterminate sentence. 1 to 15 years per count means the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole will determine the actual release date. They could serve as little as 4 years. They could serve the full 30. It depends on behavior, rehabilitation assessments, parole board decisions. 4 years minimum, 30 years maximum. The actual time? Unknown. This case ripped the veil off influencer culture. Ruby Franke had millions of followers who trusted her parenting advice. Viewers invited her into their homes daily through their screens. She had credibility, authority, a platform, and she used that platform to build an image while hiding atrocities. Before partnering with Jody, Ruby's content had already raised eyebrows. She'd publicly discussed taking away her children's bedrooms as punishment, withholding meals. Strict, harsh discipline that some viewers criticized as excessive. But Ruby defended it as proper parenting, teaching consequences, building character. The controversy generated views, engagement, revenue. Then she met Jody Hildebrandt, and the discipline escalated from harsh to criminal, from controversial to torture. Jody's Connections program preached extreme personal accountability, cutting off distortion, her term for anyone who enabled bad behavior, including family members. Ruby became isolated from her husband, Kevin Franke, who was not charged and reportedly had no knowledge of the abuse occurring at Jody's home. Ruby's eldest children, the 12-year-old boy who escaped and his 10-year-old sister, became prisoners. Test subjects for Jody's twisted theories, disguised as religious enlightenment. The 8 Passengers channel was deleted. Ruby's online presence vanished. Sponsors distanced themselves. YouTube itself faced questions about how influencer families exploit children for content and what oversight exists to protect those kids. Because here's the reality. Child influencers have almost no legal protections. They're not covered by traditional child labor laws. Their parents control their images, earnings, and exposure. And when those parents use their platform to project wholesomeness while committing abuse, who's watching? No one was watching Ruby Franke's eldest kids. Not until a 12-year-old boy climbed out a window and ran for help. Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt sit in Utah prisons now. Their fate in the hands of a parole board. Their minimum 4 years, their maximum 30. But those children? They'll carry the scars forever. Rope burns that healed on the outside but left marks on the inside. Starvation that damaged growing bodies. Psychological torture that taught them their own mother saw them as broken things, needing purification. 8 Passengers was a lie. Connexions was a scam. And 2 women who presented themselves as authorities on wellness and parenting were monsters. A 12-year-old boy's courage, his barefoot run to a neighbor's door, ended the nightmare. But the healing? That's only just begun. Case 10. Gabriel Fernandez, Palmdale, Los Angeles County, USA. October 2012 through May 2013. Gabriel Fernandez told everyone. He told his teachers. He told deputies. He told therapists. He told social workers. He told anyone who would listen that his mother and her boyfriend were hurting him. And no one saved him. October 2012. 8-year-old Gabriel was returned to his mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, Isaro Aguirre. He'd been living with his uncle. Safe, cared for, happy. But the system decided Gabriel belonged with his mother. So they sent him back. They sent him to die. Within weeks, the abuse began. And it didn't stop until Gabriel was dead. Isaro Aguirre hated Gabriel, called him gay, targeted him with a specific, focused cruelty that went beyond discipline or punishment. This was torture, systematic, relentless, sadistic. BB gun pellets were shot into Gabriel's body. Not once, not accidentally. Over and over. Tiny metal projectiles lodged in his skin, his tissue, his flesh. Investigators would later find them embedded throughout his body during the autopsy. Each one a separate act of violence. Each one causing pain. Each one a choice. Beatings with a baseball bat followed. A wooden bat swung at a small child. Against his back, his legs, his head. Blows that would incapacitate an adult. Gabriel was 8 years old, 60 pounds. And Isaro swung that bat like he was trying to hit a home run. Gabriel was burned. Cigarettes pressed into his skin. Flames held close enough to blister and scar. Pain that doesn't fade. The smell of burning flesh. And no one to help him. He was starved, denied food for days, while Pearl and Isaro ate in front of him. His stomach cramped, his body weakened, and when he complained, they punished him more. Forced ingestion of cat litter. Imagine being made to eat the contents of a litter box. The texture, the taste, the degradation, the humiliation. Gabriel was forced to consume waste and filth as punishment. He was locked in a cabinet, a small, confined space, barely big enough for a child to curl up inside. Hours in the dark, sometimes overnight. No bathroom, no water, just a wooden box and the sound of his own breathing. Gabriel went to school covered in bruises. Teachers saw, they reported it, over and over. They called the child abuse hotline. They documented injuries. They filed paperwork. They did everything they were supposed to do. Security guards at Gabriel's school noticed. They reported it too. A teacher named Jennifer Garcia called so many times she lost count. She begged someone to intervene, pleaded for someone to check on Gabriel. She saw him deteriorating before her eyes and couldn't understand why no one was helping. Deputies responded to the home multiple times. They saw Gabriel. They saw the conditions. They filed reports. And then they left. No warrant, no removal, just paperwork and departure. Social workers visited. Gabriel told them what was happening, showed them bruises, described the abuse, and they downgraded his case from high risk to moderate risk, filed it away, moved on. Over 60 calls to child abuse hotlines, 60 opportunities to save Gabriel Fernandez, 60 failures. May 22nd, 2013. Pearl Fernandez called 911. Gabriel was unconscious, not breathing. She claimed he'd fallen and hit his head. Paramedics arrived and knew immediately this was no fall. Gabriel's injuries were catastrophic, extensive, clearly the result of prolonged abuse. They rushed him to Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Gabriel died 2 days later, May 24th, 2013, 8 years old. The autopsy report was one of the most disturbing documents Los Angeles County had ever processed. BB pellets throughout his body, fractured ribs, fractured skull, burns, bruises covering every inch of skin, malnutrition, evidence of being bound and gagged, signs of blunt force trauma to every part of his body. The medical examiner concluded Gabriel had been tortured to death. Pearl Fernandez pleaded guilty to first-degree murder with a torture special circumstance. She avoided trial, avoided facing a jury, sentencing, life in prison without the possibility of parole. She will never walk free, never see the outside of a prison again. Isaro Aguirre went to trial in 2017. The jury convicted him of first-degree murder with torture special circumstance. Sentencing, death. He sits on California's death row, awaiting execution. California has a moratorium on the death penalty, so Isoro will likely die of old age in prison rather than by lethal injection. But the death sentence stands. 4D CFS, Department of Children and Family Services, social workers were criminally charged. Stephanie Rodriguez, Patricia Clement, Kevin Baum, Gregory Merritt. They were accused of falsifying records and failing to protect Gabriel, of seeing the abuse and doing nothing, of downgrading his case despite overwhelming evidence of danger. In 2020, an appellate court dismissed the charges. The legal system decided that while the social workers failed morally and professionally, they couldn't be held criminally responsible. They lost their jobs, but they didn't go to prison. Gabriel's case might have faded into the background. Another dead child, another bureaucratic failure. But then Netflix released The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez in 2020. 6 episodes. Interviews with teachers, family members, first responders, prosecutors. Crime scene footage. 911 calls. Heartbreaking testimony from people who tried to save Gabriel and were ignored. The documentary went viral. Millions watched. National outrage exploded. Suddenly, everyone knew Gabriel's name. Everyone saw his face. Everyone understood how a child could tell dozens of people he was being tortured and still die. The documentary sparked national debate on child welfare reform. Politicians couldn't ignore it. Agencies couldn't hide behind bureaucracy. The public demanded change. Los Angeles County implemented sweeping reforms. Reduced caseloads for social workers, so each child gets proper attention. Mandatory supervisory sign-offs on high-risk cases, so decisions aren't made by one overworked employee. Better cross-agency collaboration, so schools, police, hospitals, and child welfare all communicate. Laws were proposed, and some passed, holding social workers criminally accountable when gross negligence leads to a child's death. Mandatory reporting requirements were strengthened. Training improved. Gabriel's face became the face of child welfare reform in America. His name became a rallying cry. His death became the catalyst for change that might save other children. But it came too late for him. Gabriel Fernandez was 8 years old. He loved superheroes. He loved his uncle. He loved life. And he told everyone what was happening to him. 60 calls, 60 chances, and the system let him die. 10 cases, 10 children, 2 countries, 1 devastating pattern. Isolation was the weapon. Whether it was homeschooling exemptions, rural distance, or withdrawn enrollment, these children disappeared from public view. Once invisible, they became vulnerable. No teachers to notice weight loss. No classmates to hear their stories. No mandatory reporters to file concerns. Respectable veneers provided cover. Foster mothers, police chaplains, YouTube influencers, church volunteers. These weren't strangers lurking in shadows. They were trusted community members. People assumed that someone with credentials, with reputation, with religious devotion couldn't possibly be a monster. That assumption was deadly. Systems failed at every level. 60 hotline calls for Gabriel. 5 referrals for Victoria. Repeated reports for Daniel. The infrastructure built to protect children became bureaucratic mazes where cases disappeared into paperwork. Agencies didn't communicate. Caseloads overwhelmed workers. Red flags were downgraded or dismissed, and children paid with their lives. These stories aren't entertainment. They're evidence. Proof that we, as a society, still haven't figured out how to protect the most vulnerable. Every reform comes after a funeral. Every policy change is written in a child's blood. If you've made it this far, you're different. You didn't look away. You didn't scroll past. That matters. So here's what I'm asking. Subscribe. Not for me, for them. Share this video. Make people uncomfortable. Force these names into conversations. Daniel, Jeremiah, Scotty, Arabella, Gabriel, Jeanette, Victoria, Brittany, Tatiana, Nakia, Aja. They can't speak anymore, so we have to speak for them.